Good morning, folks. I'm just going to go off the top of my head this morning. For one, I want to keep a little bit of pressure on myself. The others, I want to stay constant. And I want to put up as much as I can here. I started a talk radio show in 2009 on a local Christian station, one of the big three in Phoenix. It's $500 an hour for airtime then. Being green, the fellow who sold me the airtime decided he'd help me by being a co-host, and he dominated the show. That didn't work out too good. Had a few guests, thought I was going to be, standard talk show radio host. Technically, things didn't go well there, and one time I found out that nothing but commercials aired for the entire hour that I was supposed to be on the air live. I thought that they had hired a brand new intern and that the intern was incompetent, and I was fearful that I was stuck with her. I didn't want to work with somebody that wasn't going to air me, And they ran non-stop commercials, and I had a really good guest. And the guest, then her husband, they were upset, and rightfully so. They expected to get quite a bit out on this one. By the way, that show was about love fraud, and the woman I had the website called Love Fraud. Like most of us, she had her wounds, and I had mine, and we shared something in common at that point. Because of that stolen hour and the failure of the radio station to they should have made that hour up, and they were only going to do it if I renewed the contract, and I wasn't going to give them any more money after that. Either give me my airtime, and it was just too much money for what it was, and I didn't like the fact that I had allowed this fella to take over the show. It was okay at times, got a few calls. Then I decided to look at another station, and it was much cheaper. Instead of $500 an hour, it was $150 an hour. The fellow over there, it was a more open-minded station, wasn't strictly Christian, and didn't have limitations on advertising, according to Christian guidelines. Anyway, I went over to the other station, and it started out pretty good. The fellow did not he didn't tell me the truth that my showtime hour would be occasionally preempted by the basketball team shows. And that was kind of an awkward thing when I drove all the way downtown and get there and find out that you don't have a show today. It was total surprise, no warning at all. The guy was kind of that was kind of a rat act. I'm sorry. It was kind of a rat not disclosing that. And that really bothered me, and they kept trying to shove me off into the evening hours of low wattage, and I didn't want to be on the air when there was a weak signal. So I just kept extending it, and I was able to extend it for quite a while. If they weren't going to air me at the normal time, I moved it over. I actually had a few people listening. I got a few calls, got a couple of compliments that just floored me, just really floored me quite well. Tried to have guests, and I ended up having to just talk by myself. And I found out people weren't calling in because one guy says, we want to hear what you have to say. They didn't want to interrupt me, which I thought was kind of amazing and respectful. One thing I liked about the studio, there's several things actually, but one thing I liked were the microphones. the microphones gave you the proximity effect, so that your voice was a little bit deeper, a little bit more masculine, had a little bit more presence. I liked that quite a bit. I also got used to going up and showing up at the studio, which kind of set the stage for and prepped me up, and I entered a different mindset for that. I loved having the music that I had going. I was using Steppenwolf's Monster for my theme song. That, by the way, was the first record album I bought when I was a kid. That's the first one I spent my own money on. That had Magic Carpet Ride on it. But Monster, that song really meant something to me. You know, the hook, the chorus, America, don't you care about your sons and daughters? It was America. It was not called United States of America. And that's kind of important. I think that's what we really should be called to begin with, is America. And we were called Americans, but today we're called citizens of the United States. They didn't even put the word America in there hardly anymore. That means something too. And I also used the locals. I like to call them a locals music. I traveled to Rome one time to see this guy from Florence. I took the train down. Had to hitchhike back because the two ladies I went with, one of them spent money on pictures for her children. She wasn't married. I doubt she's ever had children. She was pretty loaded when she said that, I think. I'm just taking a guess. I don't remember very well. And I also went down to Boston one time from up in New Hampshire to see him as well. And the song was Samba Pati by Carlos Santana. I used to play guitar, and that was one of my favorite songs. I love the double bends that Carlos did. I love the fact he could hold a note for about a minute and a half and make it come right back down into the song. He had the other guitarist up there with him, a young fellow, younger than I was. Man, I envied him. I would love to have been up there on the stage, all of those stacks and racks of Fender amps behind them. Well, he had a really good gig. What a break it was to play with Carlos Santana. Carlos is now an inhabitant of the Valley of the Sun. I think he's got a restaurant as well. I've never been there. I don't know what it's like. I know that he is, from what I can tell from it, since he's a really nice fellow, really nice guy. Some of the musicians he's kept in touch with and he's reached out to. It touches my heart. I went to school, music school, with some people that really made it quite well and some people that had made it before they even went to school. Heck, at Berklee College of Music in Boston, I had one guy there, and I didn't think much of him. I didn't think wasn't really super bright or anything. And I mean, I knew he could play guitar. I didn't think he was all that great. But he was coming up to Berklee College of Music during the week, and on weekends he went back to New York City to work. He had a job working on the midnight, whatever it was, midnight show on television. I mean, he had the gig. Why bother to go to school when you're already on the job? Another fellow I went to school with, he became pretty famous. He was much younger than I. Well, not much younger. I was kind of old for Berklee at the time. The average age was probably 18, and Steve Vai was 18 years of age, from New York. Got to meet his family and his sister. They were kind of quirky folks. They reminded me of my family. I mean, they were really loving people. His parents were wonderful. His mom was great. Steve's claim to fame, wow. He didn't do any drugs. Almost all the rest of us had been tainted. And at that point in time, I gave him up. I was pretty proud of him because he never did anything. Clean-nosed, straight-ahead kid, wore a black leather motorcycle jacket, long black hair. I mean, I think it was black. He's Italian, you know. Sei Italiano. He practiced a lot, more than I did. And he was hard on himself. He pushed himself. He practiced 12 and a half hours a day. He had monstrous hands. I have small hands. I get between the upper frets really nicely. I had better technique from classical guitar, but I had to, because with small hands, you got to really make the most of what you have. Stevie had these big mitts that were like twice the size of mine. He could reach. I don't think his hands were as large as Hendrix's. Yngwie Malmsteen was a big guitar player at the time, and he had hurt himself through his guitar playing and his guitar technique. You know, I think that Stevie and I hung out. Steve, I should call him really, not Stevie. We played a little bit together, but our styles were different. Not really tremendously compatible. We played Hendrix's Little Wing one time together, exchanging licks, and you would think it's the same song, and you would think it would work. My style was very refined. It had to be to pull off that stuff. So I was pretty precise, which made it kind of staid in a way, I guess. But it was completely different. You know, I was doing a pretty good job. And Steve just clamped away at it. And it was kind of choppy. But he had the spirit of it better in some ways. I mean, he actually he put a spirit to it that I couldn't put to it. Mine was kind of finessed, and, it sounded great. And his was, it was kind of a little bit more rock and rollish. It had a little bit more twang to it. It had a little bit more motion in some ways. It was much more raw, and mine was super refined, and we couldn't play together. I mean, another thing is I like blues. Steve didn't like blues. I knew him back when he was transcribing music, and he had transcribed UK's album, and I got a copy of that somewhere. It's probably faded by now. He worked really hard, went to the UK concert. I went there as well, and he approached the keyboard player in particular. I don't remember the keyboard player's name. And I think he approached them with his transcription, and he impressed the keyboard player and said, "This is better. That was better than what he had." You know, playing music is one thing, transcribing it and writing it is another thing, and the technicalities of it. Well, sometimes the written note does not equate with the real musical note, the played note, what's performed. And so this keyboard player was super impressed with Steve Vai's. Steve Vai was, let me put it this way, when it came to transcribing, he was good. We shared an ear training class together. I sat next to him one day, and I had a pocket full of sharpened number 2 pencils, brand new. I was kind of nerdy. And Steve's sitting there next to me, and he's got a ballpoint pen. I'm sitting there thinking, the guy's got a ballpoint pen. So, of course, I offered him a pencil. He was 18 at the time, and it's a great guy. I mean, he was not full of himself. He was humble. I think I was too. Stevie didn't need a pencil. Steve didn't make mistakes. He had perfect pitch. He took the dictation. We had, they always played it on the piano, and we had to dictate. It was dictated, but they'd play on the piano, and we'd have to write this stuff down. And it was one of my worst classes. I really struggled in that, and I was always erasing and changing my mind, outthinking myself quite a bit. Steve was one of the guys with perfect pitch, and he did it in ink. and I watched him do it, and I was just flabbergasted. I really didn't do very well in that class. He did. Had another guy in another class, well, maybe that same class actually. We had to take ear training quite a couple of semesters, and it was good. It was hard. It was the hardest thing for me. I went and did the extra hours with a pianist from Singapore. She was really cute. She was sweet. She was nice. People from Singapore they're nicer than we are. BTN. I kind of had a crush on BTN. She was petite. She was cute. And she was helpful as she could be, and I was busting my butt because I wanted to make it. I wanted to have success. Anyway, this other fellow, this horn player, he also transcribed using a ballpoint pen because he too had perfect pitch. However, I discovered that his perfect pitch wasn't so perfect. It was actually perfect relative pitch. So I can't even remember what the differences are now, but back then I knew what the differences were. It was like one being innate and the other one being learned. Now, he was good. I mean, he got it right. His pitch was really good. And I say perfect relative. That's the term that I use. I don't know if that's the formal term. But it was like it was learned. Once he had his reference point, he went. He was right. So it was like his ear had a little slop in it, if you will, or he had the ability to transpose in his brain. That was innate to him. Whereas Steve Vai, as I recall, he just heard it. He didn't need a reference. I remember his girlfriend, Pia. She was cute as could be. She was very sweet on him, and, well, I think they're still together. I hope they are. Folks, we got to support families. If you see an American couple and they're struggling, don't interfere. Stay out of that. You don't want to get their crap on you. You don't want that mess. You don't want those waters muddied up. Stay out of it. Don't go off with another man's wife. If you know they're still married and they're separated, stay away. You know, I realize the women think they are equal and they can dictate and do all kinds of stuff, but it's really screwed up. Don't do it to yourself. Not only don't do it to them, but don't do it to yourself, because the only person you're really hurting, really screwing is yourself. I'm sorry, man. It's just a passing thing. And you may really have it for this individual, be attracted, but don't do it. Anyway, especially when there's children involved, don't do it. You know, the children need their parents. And the parents, they married each other. They need to work it out. And I can pretty much guarantee you fellas that you're just going to be inheriting the mess. You know, you're just going to be getting something that's not so good, that has not worked out the stuff. Now the psychologist comes back. You know, we are attracted to each other for a reason. And the reason we're attracted to each other is in order to satisfy unmet childhood needs. This is the theory of Harville Hendrix, a gentleman out of the Seattle area. He became famous writing his book at the master's level. You know, it's like, why bother to go to school after you get the gig, right? Yeah, he had the gig. Harville Hendrix, How to Get the Love You Want. Ladies, I know one or two of you might be listening to me at this point. If you want a man, and you have the copy of that book, and you find a man, and you're interested in marrying him, and if you can get him to do those exercises in the appendix with you, even if he doesn't want to read the book, if you can get him to look at those, well, you probably got a beta male. I'm sorry about that. But you got somebody who's going to want to work with you. Because basically the purposes of those exercises is so you might identify the imago. the imagination that each of you have as to what you want in another partner. And the problem is, what you're going to find is you want somebody who's got the best qualities for you. Okay, that's no problem. Those you're usually aware of, you know. Most of you say, I want money. Or I want a guy with blonde hair. I think I might qualify for that, huh? No, you might want a guy who's athletic. Almost all of you want a guy who's 6 feet tall, minimum. Even if you're only 4'11", you want a 6 foot man. And by the way, that's like very few men available over 6 feet tall. And another thing you all seem to want is a 6-pack. And I'm not talking Budweiser. I'm talking abdominal muscles. You want a man who's cut, ripped. I know we're supposed to be the ones that want you for your bodies and physique and all that, but the thing is that you're interested in ours more than what you want to say. That's just the way it is. That's fine. So there is that physical attraction that's got to happen as well. Some women say they want a man that's funny. Some women say they want a man that's intelligent. Most all of you want somebody who's wild about you and will dog you. I don't know how else to put it. That's the phrase we used when I was younger. So kind of rough, kind of violent, kind of aggressive, committed to the act. I guess that's a nice way to put it. Committed to the act. Not hesitant. And potent. That's what you want. Yeah, let's face it. You want a man for his body. We need to get that out there. Harville Hendrix said also that we choose our partners because we choose somebody with the best qualities and with the worst qualities. That's what his theory was. And the theory was that it would be somebody who would antagonize you, if you will, kind of the same way your parents antagonized you. Somebody that would challenge you. And the idea is that you want to relive your childhood with this poor, unsuspecting victim. You want to relive your childhood and do the same stuff you did with your family, in your family of origin, with your parents, with your brother and sister, with everybody in the family of origin. Only this time you want to get your needs met. Now, that's a pretty tall, lofty, it's a lofty ideal, it's a lofty imagination for a master's level therapist. I mean, I'm really impressed by Mr. Hendrix, who's now Dr. Hendrix. I don't think he's alive. He's written over 30 books. But just get the big book, the original book, How to Get the Love You Want. You don't really need the workbooks. You don't need the other books specific to this or specific to that. The original book's got the power in it. Get it for $15, or you can go to a used bookstore and get a copy for 50 cents like I did. I have always given those books away because they make wonderful gifts. When people are in love with somebody, it's like give them that book and have them read through it. Become aware of it. Now, some sections of that book are pretty rough. Real rough. I have had to read through it a couple of times to get it. That might be because I have issues with it, but I mean, that's usually what it means to me when I have issues with the book, have trouble with it, is I might have the issues. It's not necessarily the book. In this case, the technicalities of the book are such that I had to read through it again. It's got some tough ideas to comprehend and absorb. So the idea is a good one. And as I'm talking to you, yeah, I know, like Mr. Rogers talked to little kids. Okay, boys and girls. As I'm talking to you, I realize that this comes from object relations therapy. Kohut developed it. Kohut and somebody else, I think, developed that. In object relations therapy, the purpose is to get the response you want. And so the drive is, I have a need, I want to get this met. And in object relations therapy, one of the most important aspects is the idea that the child reaches across to the adult. It's not the adult reaching across to the child, which is like, huh? How does the child do that? Well, the child develops as a result of this drive and as a result of this accomplishment by getting by eliciting the response from the object, from the parent that the child needs and wants. The child gets a great amount of growth. Their self grows. They value themselves. I think I'm getting that right. That's probably one of those books I left on the shelf. I didn't think much of that in graduate school, but it does have some really good applications, especially when you realize that the gap between mother and child hardly exists. There's hardly a gap there. So there's not much in terms of objects, relations, development off mom. You're part of mom's body. It's automatic. So you get the response you want from mom automatically. She gives it to you. Dad, on the other hand, father's different. Father didn't carry you. Father is distant, psychologically, emotionally. Father's operating more on an intellectual fashion and less on an emotional scale. Mom was all on an emotional scale. Her child can do no wrong. She'll protect that child. Like Mama Moose or Mama Bear, she'll kill for her child. However, unfortunately, she also causes criminality because her child can do nothing wrong. Her child can do no evil. Not my child, maybe your child, but not my child. You have to understand, folks, that mothers entitle their children. Fathers don't entitle their children. With father, it's earned. So when that little baby generates that cute cooing or whatever it is, and just does that flailing of the arms, pick me up, and reaches across and gets this response from Papa, from Father, from Dad, that child grows. That child actually develops a bit, develops a self, gets a sense of self by having this reflected in the mirror of the parent. Trying to give you some tips and clues on that. I haven't talked like a psychologist in a long time. I kind of got ran out of the profession by the Arizona Board of Psychologist Examiners. We are going to cover more psychology. I'm not getting any feedback from anybody. One of the nice things about the show was I got feedback through the board. Oh, they were tired of the Dr. Ken show. They were tired of hearing about it, especially one jackass on the board. Oh, his last name I should remember because his... apparently, Wexler! Yeah. Mr. Wexler, how you doing out there? You don't deserve a doctorate. I think you had a PsyD, then you finally realized that, and then went and got a PhD. I'm not sure, but you were a jackass. That's all there is to it, and you still are probably. You had all of those graduate students out there, and they were listening to my show because they wanted to become psychologists, and I was giving them ideas that you folks could never generate. You dumbasses just can't think straight. You libtards can't help people, and most psychologists have forgotten their roots. They've forgotten their skills, what the craft is about, and how to do things. They've forgotten real nuts and bolts basics. Now they've become nothing but glorified baby psychiatrists, mini psychiatrists, trained to make a referral for medications. They don't even understand the diagnostic process and what happens in themselves. Well, I think I'm kind of unique in that. I had some handicapping factors, shall we say. I had some disabling factors. I had some really rough training. I had some excellent training, and you guys don't get that. You know, I ended up working for 2 years at an internship level status, and you guys did 1 year. And a lot of you had these mamby-pamby milquetoast internships. Folks, psychology is chock full of liberals. And if you think you can go to a liberal psychologist and get help, you can't. The basic philosophies of their lives blind them, bias them, so they can't help you. They will undermine you. They will make things much more difficult for you. Their logic and rationale will make it rough. Why? Because they don't share the same value system, and they don't even respect the diversity, if you will. They don't respect your value system. We were trained to respect the diversity, respect other people's value systems, learn what they were, meld with them, become one with all of that stuff so you could understand it. And yes, I did go into some pretty dark, deep places, especially in the Arizona Department of Corrections. Now, I didn't like having to take the job, but when I look back at the experience, they accelerated my growth. I mean, I had 5 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, a luxurious 20 minutes. I didn't get a full hour with a man, and a repeat visit was like maybe, but quite often not, because I was in maximum security. So most of the guys I saw one time, and that was it. And when a man needs help, I want to help him. And so I had to speed up the process, and I had to take some hunches. I had to pray, just about get down on my knees and pray to God every time. You know more about a man than I'm ever going to know. So God, Creator, Father, God, tell me whatever it is that you need this man to know, what you need this individual to hear. Tell me what message you want me to give him. And the prayer got answered. Some magic happened. 15 minutes in, I got my impressions. For 5 minutes I talked. The jaws dropped. They left. I didn't think I'd see him again. 3 weeks later, 6 weeks later, I get a health needs request, an H&R. And they're going to spend, what was it, $2 or $3 out of their bank in order to see me. And I charged them. I collected it. The others, the liberal jackasses, didn't collect it. I'm not getting the money. It's coming out of their bank, going in the Department of Corrections. I'm going to give them some value. I'm going to fulfill that health needs request. I'm going to kick butt. I'm going to do the best I can. I'm also going to do a fully informed consent. I'm going to make sure this individual understands that if they report a capital crime to me, if they report any criminality, I'm going to make a report. And so the 2 reports I made were in the event of a murder or in the event of child abuse. And the people in the state of Arizona, legislators, they got the dumbest legislators in the world in Arizona when I was practicing there. They wrote the law up so that there was no relief. So anytime you discovered somebody that had been abused as a child, you had to make the report. And of course, whatever the department was at the time, I think they took it apart and reformed it. Their Department of Family Children's Services, that's what we called it in Alaska. They got tired of me calling up. We already know about it. Well, yeah, I know. He's even down for it, corrected for it here. You don't have to call up. I says, yes, I do. The law is written requiring me to call up. It provides no relief. Please make a note for it in your records, and I will do the same in mine. They got upset. I don't care. The law says I'm going to do it that way. I'm doing it that way. I feel good at the moment. I woke up, sunrise, pretty much slept through the night, had to get up a couple of times. Been drinking a little bit more water. Had to go for some damn test. And these medical institutions they're losing favor with me awfully quickly. In this case, it was Smile, Scottsdale, Southwest Medical Imaging. And they set an appointment for me, and they were closed, and they wouldn't answer the phone. They kept giving me automated machine calls, computer calls all afternoon. And I kept trying to call them, and they insisted I had to call them back because they had an order from my doctor. Well, we already had the order. We already had the thing scheduled. And here they are calling me nonstop. And they don't give me an option to even have a real person. So I'm picking up the phone live, and they aren't. And I can't get them to answer the phone when I call back. So you folks, after making me drive all the way downtown, drinking all that liquid, all that water, burning all that gasoline, all that precious fuel, and wasting my time, you're not getting my business anymore. I don't care how new and how beautiful your facilities are and how you might even do better quality imaging. You're fielding out all of your office work. I'm tired of your computers and your automation. You say, go do it on the internet. I hate doing things on the internet. You make too many mistakes. It's way too public. I don't want to register all my activities in my life on the internet. It's bad enough that I'm putting my face out there. It's bad enough that I'm feeding the beast. I do not like feeding this beast system. And that's what I regard it as. Only we've got the biggest, baddest, best mother you-know-what system in the world ever in history. We brought down the beast modalities from Rome. That's pretty obvious. Most people know that. We also brought it down from Babylon. And, everybody wants to know where the beast is today. Oh, and we brought it down from Egypt. And in case you're wondering, those long-skulled guys, and I want to cuss on that one, they were in Egypt. Those pharaohs wore those hats for a reason, man. They had big heads. Yeah, and those hieroglyphs where you see this big Egyptian and these little subjects? We say that was artistic rendering to show the man's power, and I got news for you folks. That wasn't an artistic rendering. They didn't have much of that stuff back then. That was the real deal. The dude was that big compared to the subjects. He was big enough to break their bodies physically, tear them apart limb to limb, and eat them. You might not think that's the way it is, but that's the way it is. Go look at the Paracas skulls. Those skulls still exist today. The characteristics of those skulls still exist. Now, it might be a watered-down version. It might be a hybrid. But they're still here, folks. Now, are they angels? Or are they aliens? Do they come from another dimension? Or just another planet? You got to be open-minded. I want you to read my Bibles that way. I want you to read whatever Bible you're reading. Remember, what's the best version of the Bible? What's the best Bible? The one you read. If you're not reading it, it's not any good. And you're not either. You can't be good if you're not reading the Bible. Now, sure, you could adopt another major religion, and I recommend that. You adopt one of them. They all have a moral code, except there's a couple religions I don't recommend for you. Actually, I don't recommend any of them at this point. But if you're really down and out, you really got some problems, then go into the churches if you want. But you got to read the Bible, and you got to do it for yourself. And you have to realize they're going to lie to you from the pulpits. They're going to preach what's not in there. They're going to make things up that aren't in there. The only way you're going to know for sure is not to turn to Dr. Kent, Doc Kent, whatever you want to call me. Don't rely upon John. Rely upon yourself. The Holy Spirit will grow within you. When you turn to Yahweh, He will turn to you. And it might not feel like it because it's new. It takes a while to get that spirit going. You have to groom it, just like they groom little girls and little boys for the sex trafficking stuff. They don't know what's coming. They don't know what it's about. But in this case, we're reading God's Word, we're accessing the mind of God, and we're taking that in us. So you can either go around, listen to the news media, garbage in, garbage out, or you can read the Bible and get good stuff in and good stuff out. It comes that way, and it takes some work. Remember, the founders of our nation all read the Bible. They were all schooled in the Bible. Regardless, it's the book that we had. So if you want to be literate, if you want to understand the foundations of Western civilization, you've got to know the Bible, not just read it. If you're young, you probably can read it and get it, just like that. You get older, you're going to have to read it a few times. Why? Your knowledge is crystallized. It's no longer fluid. But the biggest problem is that the big box churches, the ones on the corners, they all lie. All they care about is your homage and your patronage. And that's it. It's a business. It's a big business for them. Oh, and they care about complying with the government's mandates. One of the government's mandates is all men came from Adam. Nope, didn't happen like that. Another one of the government's mandates is, hey, anybody acts weird, remember Big Sister, Homeland Security, Janet Napolitano? See something, say something. See something, say something. Shh. Man, I heard that's what they did in Nazi Germany. And you won't hear me using that word Nazi very much. I don't like it. It's a made-up term coined after the war. It was a derogatory term. It's not respectful. Shouldn't we respect everybody, including Nazis? Well, those boys inside the Ukraine they're getting eliminated. And I don't understand them very well. I just remember seeing the black sun patches on their uniforms. Okay. And they were all white boys. So what? What really stood out was the patches of ancient Khazaria, short little symbol that was not the dominant symbol on their shoulder patch. But apparently they know their roots, and they're from ancient Khazaria. They're the Khazarians, the Khazarian mafia. Actually, that's not the mafia. Those guys got uniforms on. I can respect that. They tell you who they are. They tell you what they're about. We know what they're about. My understanding is that when they first encircled the soldiers and the troops in those cities on the eastern part of the Ukraine, that they were going through those boys. And what they were doing was they were looking for them, and they were eliminating some of them. Sounds horrible, but they basically were eliminating any of the whatever the Nazis, as Putin's referred to them. They were inspecting them all to see if there were any tattoos, anything hidden tattoos on their torsos indicating that they were hardline, hardcore. I think they just took them out and killed them. The basic idea is that you can't let them go. They'll just come back to haunt you. They'll come back to bite you in the ass. They'll come back and they'll fight a very subtle little war against you. If they're really that hard and dedicated, they'll be doing all kinds of sabotage, all kinds of hit and run skirmishes, flanking moves. Some of the best battlers in the world were doing flanking moves. I think Swamp Fox, he always did a flanking move. He prevailed. He hit him and he ran. He had a smaller force, and That's what he did. I don't know much about that. Some of the boys from the South that I worked with were bragging about that. I think that's kind of what they did to me. The libtards at work went at me from the side. Liberals don't play fair, folks. They've been running roughshod over us, claiming that we have to coexist. We have to be respectful of them. But they don't tolerate us. So, if you're a conservative fellow and you show up before a board of psychologists, examiners, they're not going to take kindly to you. They've been eliminating us from the licensed holders for decades. They've been discriminating against us. They see a conservative. They just, back when they had oral examinations, and say, I went to Oregon and tried passing the exams there. 5 domains. I got down to 2 domains. I got whatever it was, I got down to 1 domain, and I was going to have to go back the 3rd time. And my supervisor, who himself was pretty liberal, very open-minded, very bright man, very good gentleman, he advised me. He said, "Don't go back. They don't want you." Well, it was nothing but women on the board, and I actually turned to a lesbian psychologist for advice and training, one of the best, I thought. And she actually helped me quite a bit so that I would understand this aspect of diversity. So, and helped me so I would better be able to serve the gay community, work better with homosexuals. I didn't have much of a problem with it. I would say not much of a problem because I had some limitations. There were some demands being put on us that I didn't quite agree with. And ultimately, the demand, and I think this is still enforced today, if you try to help a gay individual go straight, they'll take your license from you because that's not allowed. You are required to help them accept their gayness. You're required to help them accept their homosexuality. Well, what about a client who shows up who says, "I don't know what I am"? What about a client who shows up and says, "I don't want to do this. I don't like this. Or I want to go back to my old lifestyle"? Is not the client allowed to choose? No, you aren't. Not according to today's psychologists. So you have to be very careful. Screen them. Weed them out. Find somebody that has the similar values that you have. You'll have better results. But you have to realize that even they are pushed to the libtard viewpoint. And even they tend to undermine you and make you dependent upon them. They don't tend to help you with your independence, to get you up and not just walking away from them, but running. And that was my goal. I wanted a man running away from me. I wanted him on his own 2 feet, under his own power, under his own willpower, doing what he wanted to do, not what I wanted him to do. I wanted him doing what he wanted to do. We've gone long this morning. I didn't even plan on doing this much. I feel a bit energized right now. That's kind of a good feeling. I'm debating going back to my morning prayer walks on a regular basis and foregoing these talks. I got a few views there. Almost nobody stays with it till the end like this. This is a long one today. I'm going to try to do short subjects. I got a lot of those short subjects. I'll try to just do a little 5-minute blurb. Get more. I think I'll have more views that way. It seems like I had more views on the subject of Clarence Thomas. I respect Justice Clarence Thomas immensely. Yet he's helped creating the case law that exists now, under which, we're going to have to get into it. The basic thing I want to get across to you is that I think that everyone that's on the Supreme Court should be removed. They are all guilty of bad behavior. In the case of Justice Clarence Thomas, he's the least guilty of them all. In the case of the others, they're pretty guilty. especially Chief Justice Roberts. His name shows up on the manifesto. Going to Epstein's Island. What was that called? Orgy Island? In other words, if your name's on there, you're guilty, and you've been there, you're guilty of bad behavior. What's he still doing on the Supreme Court? The Constitution doesn't hold for lifetime appointments. It says may serve while under good behavior. And the B in behavior is capitalized, even though it's not at the beginning of a sentence. Elena Kagan has compromised herself. She was the attorney representing Obamacare before it went before the Supreme Court, and she failed to recuse herself. I'm sorry, boys and girls. She shouldn't even be allowed to practice law. I tried to file against her license on that, but they don't help you very much. They protect those people down there. I don't know where her law license is at, but I sure wish somebody would file a complaint against the board against her own bar association. And I guarantee the bar association won't do a damn thing, but you ought to do it, and you ought to publicize it just for shits and grins. Just to get it out there so the rest of us realize that these bar associations are good old boy clubs and they don't clean themselves up very well. You don't have to worry about psychologists. They're nuts. They're crazy. They're mad. They're evil. They're psychotic. I've never seen anything but a group of vicious people up there. They will be kind of nice, but for the most part, they love their power. They love exercising that power. I saw an old guy go in there, and he was obviously needing to retire. And they weren't very nice to him. The way they handled him and treated him was disrespectful. Grossly disrespectful. I watched it and I was pissed. I was angry. Man, I wanted to get a whip out and take it to those old boys and the girls and the psychologist board of examiners. This old man didn't need to be treated with disrespect. Let's face it, we get old slowly. We all get old. We all give up our abilities, faculties, but we all fight. We fight till the end. And that's a good idea. There's no sense caving in early. Psychologists have helped to destroy America. You want the proof? Go get Carol Quigley's book, Hope and Tragedy. Get it in hardcover. You will see the name of the family instrumental in psychology that helped destroy America. You young folks out there, you budding psychologists, you better stay tuned in. I'm gonna do everything I can right here on these videos. I don't have the digs that I'd like to have. I don't have the desk that I'd like to have. I've got a real tiny desk here. It's so small. I got such a mess. I'm pretty embarrassed by it at the moment, but I'm in the middle of getting things done. Was supposed to get a bigger rig, but I got ripped off of my family inheritance last year. Pretty major loss. How major? It was enough to get me off the streets. It was enough to buy a house. I could have bought any Porsche I wanted with it. It was that much. It was just a matter of managing it and handling it right. And I could have bought any of these things, even with $100,000 tagged onto it, because they're so rare. Yeah, Porsche's gotten pretty ridiculous lately, and they don't care about us. They don't make products that last in many ways. Oh, they last as long as you're willing to shell out the money, and after 10 years of age, they jack the price up on the parts. Okay, I understand that's an industry practice, an industry standard, but what I don't like is when another guy makes a rear hatch strut that lasts the lifetime of the automobile, and you can only get, 70,000 miles out of rear hatch struts on a Porsche Cayenne? Oh, they don't put those struts on there anymore. Now it's electric. So now you got a computer to maintain. You got more parts to it that can go bad. Okay, great. As if that's progress. And another thing was that expansion, the coolant expansion box. That only lasted so long as well. They all break. You would think Porsche and their fine engineers would at least be able to dictate to their subcontractors, what it would take to make a bottle that wouldn't crack. So they wouldn't have to sell you a $400 coolant expansion box again for your Porsche Cayenne. And likewise, there's a few other problems that they've had that they've not lived up to, and they don't step up very well. The worst thing is the service that you get at some of these dealerships that I've had. These guys can do some damage to your car. Porsche doesn't give a shit. They don't correct them. I think that dealerships should be pulled. If you're not going to maintain these fine automobiles, if you're going to sabotage them, and if you don't know how to work on them, I think dealerships should be pulled. I'll name a couple for you right now. In Boise, I wouldn't own a Porsche in Idaho, period. Nah, man, forget about the one in Boise. Mechanic didn't even know that my car wasn't running right. Had to take it clear to Bend. A wire hadn't been reattached, so the turbos weren't spooling up fully. And he didn't know the car well enough, so I took it out and drove with him, and he couldn't tell. And he drove. I don't even know if he drove it himself. I didn't like him. I don't like that dealership. It should be gone. Fort Wayne, Indiana. Oh, they had a 918 Spider in, so all their Porsche mechanics were working on this Wonder machine. Now I understand, $1.5 million, and they're getting paid big bucks to do the service on this machine. Great. So what, they put an Audi mechanic on my car who can't even put the coolant level, fill the coolant level upright so it'll overheat? It was short a gallon of fluid when I got it. And then I take in a bad battery, and they can't replace a bad battery because I didn't buy it from them, which put my alternator at risk. Do you know what a Porsche alternator costs? It was $1,700 about 7 years ago. I took him to small claims court. My professional witness, nobody will take a man at his own word, decided he didn't want to show up. And so I lost the case. I don't mind losing it. I went there, and I mean, what can you say? It's pretty much stacked against you. Had they replaced the battery, the alternator might have done just fine, but they didn't. And as a result, I had to replace the battery and the alternator. Places like that, they shouldn't be allowed to be Porsche dealerships. Now, I'm going to tell you of a couple of good places. Porsche of North Scottsdale was excellent. They got one thing wrong. I'll cover that at a time. I'm being picky when I say that. They're good. Man, the one in Indianapolis was like doing a pit stop. I mean, they are excellent. If you live in Indianapolis, that's the Porsche dealership to go to. Okay, there. You've got two real good dealerships to go to that I'm telling you right now. Yeah, I like the one in Bend. The problem was that they couldn't get all the work done at one time, and I had to make 2 trips out there, and they were long trips. I didn't think that was a fair deal. They really should have done more. I told them what the problem was. I mean, it's like going to the doctor. You tell them what the problem is, and they don't want to listen to you. So I would say that Bend is pretty good. They could have done a better job for me. All right, folks. The camera just dimmed on me, and we're at a full hour mark. May Yahweh bless you today. May you have had some joy in my video. Please share it. And you can dislike it if you want. That helps the algorithm as well. I'm sure you can find some reason to dislike it. And you might find a reason or two to like it. You take care. This is just off the top of my head. I'm going to call it Morning Musings. I covered a broad range of stuff, some of it pretty serious. Yahweh bless.